Reform means change, like change in a good way, to reform something. So law reform is a process of changing the law. What are we going to change the law for? Well, what do you do with it? Well, you try to make it more current. You try to correct any problems that have existed with the law. And it may be that it's too complicated, so simplifying the law, or fix some sort of injustice. Maybe the law when they first passed it made sense, or maybe it didn't, and it's caused some unjust situations. But it's very important that you understand that law reform is really hard. And you know that there are laws that people complain about all the time and they don't get changed. And you think, why don't they get changed? Why don't they just make this a law? And you hear that all the time. Why don't they make it a law that blah, 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 blah? But just because the law should be changed, it doesn't mean it will be. Just because it is wrong in my opinion or your opinion, it doesn't mean that it's going to change because there are so many problems involved in getting it changed. So when it comes to law reform, you need to look at three things. You need to look at the question of why does the law need to change? The question of who recommends those changes, like the specific changes, what should happen, what sections should be there and everything. And how does the law end up changing? And the way that the syllabus looks at it, rather than the why, the who, and the how, is they look at conditions that give rise to the need for reform. And the subheadings are changing social values, new concepts of justice, new technology. So there are reasons why the law needs to change. So say there's new technology, so they come up with a new technology, like when they worked out the internet, and then suddenly they need to have new laws because people are doing the wrong thing on the internet. So new technology is a condition that gives rise to the need for reform. A condition, something that is going on that gives us a reason to change the law. The people who recommend specific changes are called agencies of reform. So the main ones are law reform commissions, but also parliamentary committees. The media recommends changes, and non-government organizations recommend changes. So these are the people who recommend the changes. But a law reform commission and the media, they can't actually change the law. So who ends up changing it? It's the mechanisms of reform. So think of the mechanics side, how it works, how it really, really happens. So the mechanisms of reform are the courts, but to a greater extent parliaments mostly, and then the UN and intergovernmental organizations that we're going to look at as well. As briefly as we kind of can, because they're not really the ones who are changing the law. So I'm going to have this thing here where you've got red and then orange, or yellow and then green. The conditions, agencies, mechanisms. So the why, the who recommends, and the how does it actually happen. And we're going to start with the conditions that give rise to the need for reform, or conditions that give rise to law reform. And that means, this idea, that it gives rise to law reform is, why does a law need to change? What are the conditions, the things that happen that give rise to, that can lead to? I don't know why they have the phrase give rise to. If you were talking to your friend and your friend said, oh, this happened in my relationship, and you said, oh, what gave rise to that? What led to that? What happened before that? So what was the need? How did it actually come about? Can lead to is a better thing. So if you rerun the syllabus, you would just say, conditions that can lead to law reform, right? Rather than give rise, because you don't say give rise. And law reform is law being changed. So the three that we look at are those three, and we're going to look at each one individually. But overall, we need to go into quite a bit of detail because you've got to inquire into, you've got to look into in quite a lot of detail the conditions that give rise to law reform. And the first one, strangely, is not really in the syllabus. And I hate things, that are not in the syllabus. I hate it when, teachers go on about something that they are really interested in, but is not really relevant to your exam. But you do need to know that, most teachers understand that the failure of existing law is the basic condition, right, that gives rise to law reform. It's not in the syllabus, but it's simple. Law reform has to happen because the existing law is failing somehow. It's failing to achieve justice, or it's failing to make everyone happy, or it's failing in some way to make at least one group of people happy because they're the ones who change the law. So the current law doesn't work the way that someone wants it to, so it changes. And the rest of the conditions tell us why it's failing, why it's not working. So say, for example, our first syllabus one. which is changing social values. So if the law doesn't change when like our society changes, then Parliament's not doing what it's supposed to. Like they're supposed to represent us. They're supposed to be representative of us. If we feel as a society that something should change, and I know that phrase "as a society" is usually what dumb people say to sound smarter, just to fill in gaps, or to write in their exams. In the Australian society, please God, don't write that. Oh, you sound so stupid. But we are literally talking about changing social values. So you can talk about it here, and the law has to keep up with those changing social values. Otherwise, people are going to go to jail for things that no one really thinks should be a crime, or the opposite. People won't be, going to jail for things that we think should be a crime, things that are no longer socially acceptable. So if you think of things like, cocaine, 100 years ago, yeah, all right, cocaine used by dentists and stuff. So it was socially acceptable. Imagine that. Imagine, these days, going to the dentist and getting some coke, and then you're like, no, I'll use it, do it myself. Don't worry about it. Whoa! But things that used to be socially acceptable, socially okay, eventually are going to change. So you take smoking, for example. Eventually there will be like a complete ban on smoking, because society has changed from everyone should smoke, it's fantastic, it's good for the lungs, to really hating it as a group, as a society. So if you take something like the partial defense of provocation, and we look at this in crime more, but basically here's how it works. You get a lighter punishment if someone says something or does something that makes you lose control and kill them. Yeah. So the problem has been that this has been used the wrong way, and it's been used, and I very specifically put that someone says something that makes you lose control and kill them. I've specifically put that, that's not the law, but that's what the general sense is, that you were provoked into it. So for example, in Victoria, provocation was removed in 2005 because of specifically that, because of the says something part, that was possible under the previous law, and it did change, which we'll go through in a sec. Mrs. Ramage told her husband that the marriage is over, and she was disgusted by him, and he was a disgusting person anyway. And then he killed her, like he murdered her. But he got less time in jail. He got something like 11 years or something like that, for murdering her, because she said words to him. And the jury apparently found that an ordinary person would also kill someone who did that to them, because everyone's a massive pussy and can't take words being said to them. Oh, you said words. Oh no, it's really hurting me. I'm losing control. And look, I can't even control my hand. It's going crazy. It's going for the knife. It's so ridiculous. But that's the way that it's been. So the reason that they got rid of that was that particular case. But the other reason, and the reason why there were calls more recently, I'll explain in a sec, to get rid of this defense, was that it reflects those old social values. The idea that women can be asking for violence by saying bad things to their partners, that is a shit old-fashioned value. And I know, like older people, like your grandparents and stuff like that, but you have to tell them, if they start saying anything like women can be asking for it, slap. No, I'm not coming again. But it is wrong. It is just absolutely wrong. There is nothing, like, I've never ever hit a woman, despite whatever anyone says, because you can just walk away from words. You just walk away. Doesn't matter what those words are. I want a divorce. Walk away. I hate you. Walk away. You're disgusting. Walk away, right? It doesn't make you lose control. And it can't, be that men are like, and judges have even said, men can be so passionate, about their women. It's like, yeah, well, how about be passionate enough to grow some balls and just walk away, yeah? So that idea that women can be asking for violence, that they can say words, and, well, why did you make me hit you? You know that I lose control when I say those words. How is that the woman's fault that you lose control when you say those words? And even victims of domestic violence say the same thing. It's like, oh, he shouldn't have hit me, it was terrible, it's terrible. But I know what he's like, and I shouldn't have said that. I knew that I was pushing his buttons. Bullshit, you knew that has nothing to do with it, right? If you know that you're going to push someone's buttons, it doesn't mean that that's your fault. It's their fault for having the buttons in the first place, yeah? And another example is that, there are these crimes of passion, like, I found my wife in bed with another man and it drove me so crazy that I killed them. That is supposed to be this crime of passion, but it's garbage. Like, you don't do that. Okay, yeah, it might make you very upset. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that an ordinary person is going to murder every time they find someone cheating. That is not an ordinary thing to do. So this is in the HSC course, and it goes through all the stuff, like all the reasons why we should keep it or get rid of it or whatever. So the reason that it came up again was that in the Singh case in 2012, Mr. Singh killed his wife, and she because she said, I want a divorce, and that divorce meant that he would have to go back to India. And apparently, the idea of going back to India was so bad that he killed her and he murdered her. Murdered her quite brutally, rather than going into it. He murdered her quite brutally, and he only got 6 years in jail because instead of being charged with murder, he ended up being found guilty of manslaughter because of this idea of provocation. Yeah, he was provoked by the verbal abuse. So that shocked everyone. Then there was another case very soon after, the Wan case, where Mr. Wan came home, like a Korean guy came home from work. I don't know why it matters if he was Korean, just explaining the name. Came home from work and went upstairs, and his wife was in bed with another man, and so he killed the man, like rather than killing the wife, which is a stranger. And he got 7.5 years. Right? Like, he killed somebody, like he murdered somebody, just because men are very passionate. It's like, oh no, passionate is like, men are passionate about cars. Oh yeah, they really care about their cars, but they're not that passionate. That is just someone being really angry and just a terrible human being. It has nothing to do with biology or anything like that. So this added to those calls that maybe we should get rid of it. Because remember the Ramaj case in Victoria, and now the Singh case, and now the Wan case. How many more of these things are going to happen? But there was a very good reason for keeping it. The victims of domestic violence, they can use this defense so that they don't have to go to jail for a long time or go to jail at all. If they've been abused for 20 years and then the guy's like sitting there having a beer watching the footy, and then she finally snaps and kills him, then that was his fault, right? That he did provoke her into that through 20 years of abuse. But you can't say self-defense because he was sitting there not doing anything. So they need some other defense, right? So that they're not held completely responsible for what they did, because his bashing and raping of her over 20 years, that's enough to provoke someone into doing something like that. But then again, on the other side, there's also the issue of the gay panic defense, which is basically if a gay guy hits on a straight man, a normal straight man is liable to lose control and kill the gay man for, I don't know, for freaking him out, for going after his I don't know, his manhood. Not literally. I mean, he's not getting sexually assaulted. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just like getting hit on, like a homosexual making in advance, making a comment to you. Then that apparently causes an ordinary person to lose control and kill the guy. But again, you can just walk away. Like, imagine the alternative. Imagine if that it could be found to be provocation if a guy hit on a woman and she killed him and said, well, he hit on me and that freaked me out, so I killed him. Every man, but like, I would be dead 1,000 times over, right? There's no doubt about it, because it would be ridiculous on that side. But apparently, a man getting hit on by other man is such an insult to his masculinity that he must lose control and kill himself. So the law ended up getting changed, right? And this is where we're talking about law reform here. It got changed to the partial defense of extreme provocation. So it means that whatever the victim did, so you lose control, you kill someone, whatever they did to make you lose control had to be a serious crime in itself. So if they like raped you and then they were getting dressed afterwards and they weren't threatening you anymore, and then you got up and you stabbed them and you killed them, then you could say, well, they did provoke me because they sexually assaulted me, and that in itself is a crime. That in itself is a serious crime, what they did to me. It wasn't just words, right? It wasn't just this gay panic defense, this, oh, I got hit on by a gay guy, I didn't know what to do because I'm likely, covering up my own homosexual tendencies and I don't want to come to grips with them, so I killed him, yeah, which is ridiculous. So that's gone, and this better reflects our changing social values because we're finally having a law that reflects how most people feel. Most sensible people, they feel that women can't be asking for getting murdered by their husbands and things like that. And gay guys aren't asking, to get killed if they hit on a straight man thinking that he's gay. There's also another example, the recognition of same-sex relationships, and this is from the family top in the HSC. And you'll notice lots of overlaps here with the HSC course because I want you to have as much a head start as possible on the HSC stuff. And there's no rule that says that you can't do HSC stuff in year 11, like HSC topics in year 11, as examples of law reform. So why not? So when it comes to same-sex relationships, the government, all the governments, you can see just how much they've done from 1999 to 2000 to 2008 to have equal rights for same-sex couples as heterosexual couples. But in 2012 and 2013, attempts to try and allow for gay marriage in 2012, like gay marriage all around Australia, in 2013, gay marriage just in the ACT, both of those failed, right? And the question isn't, whether we should or shouldn't, allow for gay marriage. The question here is, does the current law reflect our social values? So in 2012, when they were inquiring into whether we should allow for gay marriage at a Commonwealth level or all around Australia, society were asked, right? We were asked to send in letters or give our opinion. They made random phone calls, thousands and thousands of random phone calls, and the results were in the final report. So out of all the people that were contacted or contacted the inquiry, 177,000, almost 178,000, agreed that we should have gay marriage. 98,000 disagreed. 610, or whatever percentage they are idiots. Because why? So if you get a phone call, right? You get a phone call, and some people I know got the phone call asking about this, asking about I'm from the blah blah, the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs. We're inquiring into gay marriage in Australia and whether it should be allowed or not. We're going to ask you about that. So if you would like to participate, then just say yes. If you don't want to participate because you have an opinion or whatever, then say no. Who would say yes, I want to participate? And then they say, okay, do you think we should allow for gay marriage? I don't know. Why did you participate, dickhead? Anyway, so they're the dumb people. There's always going to be people like that. So that's a pretty large sample. To ask the opinions of 276,000 people, that's way more than we asked 100 people, like Family Feud style, right? That's a huge number of people. So you can be pretty certain that that's going to be accurate. And 64.3% said yes, we should allow for gay marriage. And 35.5% said no, we shouldn't. And that's a pretty clear majority. So no, the law does not reflect our changing social values when it comes to same-sex marriage because, you have it statistically proven there. And whether you think, oh, well, it doesn't really have to be according to what everyone thinks. No, that it kind of should be in most areas. Unless it's a safety issue or something like that. It's most people don't like seatbelts. Well, tough. Most people are dumb when it comes to their own safety, and we don't want people dying and children dying and all that sort of stuff. But it's something like this, a social institution like marriage, it probably should reflect changing social values. We also have our second point, which is new concepts of justice, right? So as society becomes more complex, our ideas, our opinions of what is justice, when if we said 100 years ago, yes, that's justice, we might have been talking about the death penalty, and then lots of people now would say, no, that's not justice. It's more just to have them in jail for the rest of their lives, or don't kill them because maybe we'll find out in 10 years that they weren't guilty and we just murdered an innocent person. So our ideas of justice change. And if the law, can't do that, the current law, then law reform should happen. So remember, this is a condition that gives rise to law reform, something that leads to law reform or should lead to law reform. So there are some examples from the HSC crime topic. Again, I'm just trying to use HSC examples so you're way ahead of everyone else. And it's youth justice conferencing and circle sentencing. in our criminal justice system, for some offenders, specifically young offenders and Aboriginal offenders, we're moving towards, or we've moved towards more recently, the idea that young people can be changed, right? We want to make sure that they don't reoffend, they don't become lifelong criminals. So we should have a different way of dealing with them. We shouldn't just send them to, have the children's court be exactly like the adult court, just with smaller chairs. It shouldn't be like that. We should have things like programs like youth justice conferencing. So if there's a less serious crime, like say, you trash somebody's shop or something like that, you can be sent to youth justice conferencing, where you sit in a room with the owners of the business that you trashed, and someone else there, of course, to mediate the discussion. And you work out, you listen to how badly you've hurt them and all that sort of stuff, and then you cry, and lots of them do, when they realize what they've actually done. And then you guys come up together with some sort of outcome plan. And there's also, a similar thing with Indigenous offenders, where instead of, just being sentenced by another white judge, the people in their community, the other Aboriginal people in their community, they do this circle sentencing thing, where they are the ones who sentence you. And now, unfortunately, though, they still sentence you to jail, but it's just you're being told by the members of your own community, you've really let us down, you've been really, really bad, and you've hurt us all and hurt our reputation, and you've disgraced all of us. And at least, it doesn't change whether they reoffend or not, but at least it makes them feel worse, and it feels like the Indigenous, people in the community, they feel more like justice has been served, because Indigenous people put the guy in jail rather than non-Indigenous people, white people. The third one is new technology, because of course, as technology gets better, the law's got to try and keep up. And the technology might be, used by individuals. So say criminals using the internet to swap child porn, or child abuse materials, as it's called now. And investigators. So say police using surveillance techniques. So technology is problematic in both of these areas. You just ask anyone who's been busted by like a speed radar thing, whereby police officer just pointing the thing at them. They get this like, oh yeah, they shouldn't have been able to do that, blah 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 blah. Well, the technology allowed them to be able to do that. So the investigators obviously want the best technology to do surveillance on us. But that can be misused, and the law needs to be around for that. And individuals misuse technology as well for all sorts of things, and you may be doing it right now as we speak. You may be downloading something illegally or whatever. So we're going to look at individuals first. There have been a whole bunch of changes to the law, and you don't really need to know all of them. But say that one up there, the Crimes Amendment, Child Pornography and Abuse Material, 2010, that covered new types of computer data, because there were new ways of storing child pornography that weren't covered by the old law, so people would have gone free. There was also one in 2012, the Crimes Amendment, Cheating at Gambling Act, which looked at ways of cheating when you're gambling on the internet, to stop that from happening. Because yeah, you can gamble on the internet, but just like everything else on the internet, you can cheat. If you go back to 2004, when phones that take photos suddenly became popular, think of these people here that were just taken, the photo was taken very sneakily and from a very strange angle. I don't know, see something in the guy's shorts there, I don't know. But yeah, don't look too close. Oh, you're all looking at it now. But yeah, if you take, people who are doing things like that, or in like, changing rooms and stuff like that, obviously a camera phone is going to turn into a pretty nasty device. So they passed the Crimes Legislation Amendment Act 2004 to make it illegal to take photos or videos, so with camera phones or whatever, of people when they're unaware of it, or undressed. Now, the best part about the law, though, is you can take photos of people. So if you walk up to someone and you take a photo of them, it's not, because you think of like the paparazzi, people get photos taken of them all the time, right? But the photo has to specifically be used for sexual gratification. So as long as you can argue that it was for something else, you're fine. Yeah, so like you're a guy that sneaks into a women's change room dressed as a woman and then takes photos and gets busted. And I'm sure you've all thought of doing that, obviously. You could say, oh no, it's for art. That's why. That's why. Or it's for something else. I'm just checking to see whether my camera is working when I take photos of these naked people. You can argue it's for something else, because the law only, because otherwise the law would just cover every selfie you've ever taken, or every picture of anyone that you've ever taken on your phone would be illegal. Although you need to think how many photos on your phone are of other people that are for sexual gratification. I'm hoping zero. I'm not being creepy. I'm saying the opposite, right? So the question there is, how far do you take this law? Do you just ban all photos altogether, or do you have like a sensible, limit on there? If you look at the investigators, there are also laws that control the way that police use technology, to catch people. So we've got a law that covers phone taps, so not getting a phone tap without a warrant. We've got a Surveillance Devices Act, which covers like bugs in houses and things like that. We also have the Law Enforcement Powers and Responsibilities Amendment in-car Video System Act, which police cars often have like an in-car camera and a microphone that record what's going on. You've seen them in like TV shows and stuff, and they're supposed to tell you, okay, you're being recorded while you're doing this, rather than making you very embarrassed later on when you find out that you were getting recorded. There are also uses by employers of technology that can be a little bit dodgy. So, say video surveillance at work. So if you go to your work and you see, like, say you're at KFC or something, you've got cameras there, they have to tell you that you're being recorded. And even if they tell you you're being recorded, they can't put cameras in like change rooms or whatever. Because there was a really like horrible bastard who he employed teenage girls, older girls, I don't know. But he would say, "Oh, no, you can get changed in the storeroom." But they put a camera in the storeroom, and he said, "Yeah, but it's not actually it's not in a changing room. So it's in my storeroom, and I just told people to get changed in there." But he didn't tell them that they were being recorded in there, which is why he got in trouble. And then in 2012, there was a big thing about privacy. They amended the Privacy Act, because the last time it had been amended was a long time ago. The time was passed was a long time ago. And the Privacy Amendment Enhancing Privacy Protection Act was passed, and it made bosses responsible for storing customers' private information. So, employers and businesses, they store a lot of private information about people, and they have to make sure that is stored securely. So it's on both sides, on the individual side and also on the law enforcement side and the boss side, and the people who are in charge of this stuff in the end. They can be in trouble for breaking these laws. So obviously, all of these things are good examples of where the technology was there, but the law wasn't there, so the law had to step in. It was a condition that gave rise to law reform.